Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first session of Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum 2025. Now we are in session. My name is Haksoon, Paik, currently serving as president of Academy of Kim Dae-jung Studies, as well as the executive director of this forum. We have two distinguished speakers today. Seated to my left is Professor John Ikenberry of Princeton University, who is recognized as a global authority in international relations studies with a particular expertise in liberal international order. Is it right? Yeah. Professor Ikenberry has earned a worldwide acclaim. According to one of the surveys among the international relations scholars, he was ranked among the top 10 scholars who produced the best work for over past 2 decades. And John, thank you so much making generously your time to come here. And I'm really sorry that you have to fly such a long hours across the Pacific and all the way down to Mokpo, but we are really excited to have you here. Seated to my right is Professor Hea-jeong of Chung-Ang University. We don't have any survey data ranking scholars in South Korea, but definitely we all know that you are one of the best in your field of international relations and also Korea-US, US-Korea relations studies. Thank you for coming and joining us. We have 1 hour and 20 minutes allocated, for this session. And so I hope, each speaker to present just 25 minutes each. And after that, we have a Q&A session from the audience. And also, I will, give the opportunity to both of you to propose a question and make comments on the other's presentation, and that is most welcome to do so. And after going through all this process, of course, I will conclude this session and hopefully finish this session by noon. And so thank you so much again. And John, now the floor is yours.
Well, it's so great to be here. Thank you, President Paik, for inviting me to be in this distinguished company to be part of this conference celebrating the peacemaking of late President Kim Dae-jung. It was actually 30 years ago that I made my first trip to South Korea, and it was at an international studies conference, and during lunchtime, a kind of VIP lunch, I was sitting next to the politician, Kim Dae-jung. And so I had my very first meeting with a Korean diplomat, namely the person whose name we are in some sense celebrating today. And then in June 2000, when President Kim made his famous trip to Pyongyang, he came back, and several weeks later I found myself at the Blue House hearing him talk about his summit with Kim Jong-il. So in many ways, my earliest impressions of Korea are tied to President Kim Dae-jung, so it's a real honor to be here. I think we're all asking the same question of what are the possibilities for peace and security in Northeast Asia and the world. And what I want to do today is really provide a kind of big picture of what may be the challenges ahead of us. We've traveled a great distance since 2000, the year 2000. 2000 was quite a year. It was a year in which President Kim made his pilgrimage to Pyongyang in June of 2000. There was real hope for peace and reconciliation in the aftermath of that visit, even unification. The Cold War, as we remember, had ended in 1989, 1991. Alliances in the aftermath of the Cold War were rebuilt. There were new initiatives to bring countries together, democracies. Trade was expanded. China joined the WTO. So there was this great sense that, of optimism about peace and security. It was a sort of liberal moment when all good things seemed to go together. Democracy was expanding, trade was expanding, human rights were spreading, economic growth, globalization was something that we actually were welcoming because it seemed to go with everything we cared about: democracy, human rights, rule of law. There was a moment in this period when the great question seemed to be settled, that we had seen communism taken to the side, and before that, of course, World War II separated modernity from these other challengers. So there seemed to be a moment of real optimism, a kind of global sunshine policy moment when we were all hoping for the best. But now, 25 years later, we are at a very different moment. 25 years later, optimism has essentially faded and gone away. We are seeing wars in Europe, in the Middle East, arms race in East Asia. So the world and world order seems to be falling apart. We are all watching, in some sense, the same spectacle, the breakdown of global order, basic rules and norms of international order rooted in the UN Charter have been eroding in real time. And the United States, I hate to say, has itself been, under the new administration, the most powerful country in the world, taking a kind of wrecking ball to the international rules and institutions, to what I call the liberal international order. In trade, alliances, multilateralism, human rights, environment, foreign aid, all the different features of American leadership are now being cut back or disavowed. So we are in uncharted territory. The U.S. Is making the world an uncharted territory in its efforts to rewrite the rules, to break the rules, to end a kind of 80-year period when the United States was leading the way in many of these areas. But it's a double shift because there's another shift in the system which is more tied not just to the United States but to a more general breakdown in international multilateral rules and institutions, a kind of 200-year period in which the world has built up rules and institutions, culminating really in the United Nations. And that period of optimism, of sense that we can do great things together, that we can create rules and institutions that will bring the world further along, have eroded and gone away. So we are at this kind of moment of pivot. Which way will we go? Will we rebuild, or will we continue to see the system break down? There's a kind of range of possibilities between great possibilities for rebuilding order and other possibilities for deterioration and breakdown. The kind of range of opportunities, the range of futures are as broad as they've been really in my lifetime. Spectrum from openness and rules to closure and empire. So we look like we're at a moment that's very troubling. In many ways, a moment not unlike the 1930s, where we see the basic structure of the system breaking down and we don't know what is going to come next. In international relations, where I do my work, basic questions are being asked. What are the sources of power, and what are the sources of stable order? Can democracies make a comeback? They're under threat today. Can US and China find a way to put their differences on a stable footing and find a path towards coexistence? Can the two Koreas find a way to get back to the peace table? And the question that I'm most interested in is the question of what is the future of liberal international order, which is to say, the cooperative organization of an open world system based on the rule of law, driven by a coalition of democracies. I was at a conference in Oxford last month, and I was asked to talk on the question, is the liberal international order dead? Quite a shocking title. Well, I, as a good academic, basically said yes and no. On the one hand, the US position is clearly not what it used to be. But on the other hand, and this is something I would like to argue today, the possibilities for building international order, rebuilding international order around the forces of openness and rule of law are still there. So I do think that there is a future, but we're going to have to navigate a very difficult present. I've suggested that there are four convictions, four ideas about how the world could be organized in a world where it's increasingly interdependent. And there are four convictions that I think really have to be put out there. And if those convictions are still good, there's still possibility for open international order. The first one is simply that it pays countries to be open and cooperative in the area of trade. Open exchange is good for all parties. Tariffs are all around us today, but the idea behind free trade, that there is mutual gains from trade, is still very much with us. International institutions have not gone away, and their purposes have not eroded ultimately. They're out there to help us facilitate cooperation, starting with the United Nations. They still matter today in developing solutions to problems that governments deal with. Thirdly, democracies still have a special solidarity, still have a capacity to work together to do things that we care about. And then finally, under conditions of interdependence, under conditions of rising interdependence, the possibilities of gains through managing that interdependence far outweigh the costs of making binding agreements associated with treaties and agreements for reducing your autonomy. So that is, again, a fundamental fact of the modern world that is still with us. And if all of this is true, if these four convictions about how to organize the international system are still with us, there's still reason to believe that cooperation is possible. What is breaking down? Well, this is where we come back to the United States. The US has played an important role over the last 80 years, really, to build an international system based on problem solving with like-minded states. Since 1945, it has played this role through alliances, through underwriting common goods through international institutions, providing support for the WHO, for the WTO, for the United Nations. So the US has played this role as a kind of hegemon that has played a kind of supporting public goods provider. And this role is now very much up for grabs. The US is stepping back from that hegemonic role, and the world is in many ways trying to figure out, well, what do we do now? For 80 years, we've had this framework for organizing international relations. Do we give up on it? Do we walk away from the United States? Do we walk away from an order where you have a leading state that plays this leadership role? Or do we wait it out? Do we hope that the current administration will eventually go away? So there is a kind of global strategy moment that we are all walking and walking through and seeing where it goes. The Trump administration is clearly trying to do things differently, and this is where you can see the Trump administration stepping into an international order that has had this 80-year framework and now is doing different things, selling off American roles that it has played in the past, stepping back from the WHO, from the Paris Climate Agreement, rewriting contracts, using tariffs to bully other countries, monetizing security. The U.S. is playing a role of trying to put pressure on its longtime allies, suggesting that they should pay more for their security. So there's again, attempt to take more out of the system than putting into the system. There's a deeper set of crises that I would also want to draw your attention to, and this is really the crises of the larger global system. And here I would mention three kinds of deeper crises that go beyond the Trump administration. One are the problems of geopolitics, the problems of power transitions, the rise of China, the return of great power rivalry, the US and Russia offering an alternative road for international order, the return of problems of security and insecurity, arms racing, attempts to push states out of regions, to develop new types of security leadership in the world. So this is one type of very important transformation in the global system. The second, the crisis of modernity. This is the problem of growing interdependence in economics, security, and environment, climate change, pandemics, technological developments, AI, as we've just heard this morning in an extraordinary presentation. So we are in the midst of technological revolutions that we haven't found a way to provide governance for. And then finally, problems of geopolitics and democracy, the problems of democracy. Liberal democracies are not performing in the way that they have in the past. Great polarization, great inequality, a breakdown in norms that democracy is something that we should have and we should attempt to preserve. So we are in this period where the basic building block of the international system, open societies organized around the rule of law, collaborative efforts across the political spectrum, the dominance of the political center, all of that is up for grabs. The landscape of security is also more generally having a difficult period. And here I would mention 5 developments that have made it more difficult to engage in peacemaking at the global level. And first of all, I would just simply say there's been a kind of exhaustion in peacemaking efforts. The role of publics in pushing their governments to engage in arms control, the non-nuclear movement that has been evident in earlier decades has kind of become less intense. Public citizens are not in the streets protesting nuclear weapons the way they did in the 1980s and later. So that's one change. Secondly, China is actively building up its nuclear weapons. It is at a stage where it is attempting to reach parity with Russia and the United States. And that trajectory is creating new insecurities and dynamics that are going to be very difficult to manage. North Korea is clearly also tied to its nuclear weapons. Its regime has made nuclear weapons a kind of signature of its regime identity, making it difficult to engage in diplomacy on denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. US-Russia, likewise, very much at a moment where the great arms control agreements of the détente period, the period when Reagan and Gorbachev ended the Cold War, all of those kinds of moments are now behind us, and a new agenda for arms control has not been imagined. And then finally, the AI revolution, as we've just heard, is creating, together with drones and robotics, creating new forms of potential warfare in the future. And we haven't even begun to think about how we are going to deal with those problems. So when we think about the problems of peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, let me draw a couple of observations. One is that there are lots of dangers, and these dangers have to do with the breakdown of relations between the United States, Russia, and China, the three countries that, together with South Korea and Japan, had been the kind of great five-party powers that were providing diplomacy to put pressure on Pyongyang to step back from its nuclear programs. So there is a kind of problem with getting the coalition together to re-engage North Korea on its weapons programs. And there's a deeper problem, of course, because North Korea is getting closer and more deeply tied with Russia and the Ukraine war, and this is in turn creating differences that are going to make it very hard for the great powers to work together in concert on North Korea. The US and South Korea, our two governments, are also at a point where there's not a crisis, I would say, but we're at a point where you can see divisions that could occur on burden sharing. Trade could become a problem that will create divisions that spill over into security. And then the question of the nuclear umbrella, the question of how nuclear weapons and the future of the alliance work together in the years ahead. So those are all problems. There's lots of uncertainties. Trump is a big uncertainty. Will he go back to the bargaining table? It sounds like Pyongyang would be willing to have another Trump summit without discussion of denuclearization, so that's a problem. But what would Trump do? There's a wild card kind of role for him. Some opportunities exist as I come here to my conclusion. One opportunity is for US and China to find a way to establish a working relationship on regional security. This is very important, and this might be the first step that we could take in getting peace negotiations more generally going forward in the region. A kind of rules of the road, Beijing and Washington working on trying to establish a kind of framework for negotiations. Not jumping in and solving all the problems overnight, but creating a kind of pragmatic working relationship that could include the future of nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula. So those, for me, are the challenges ahead. In some ways, what I am saying in my remarks is the dangers are greater than the opportunities, but there are opportunities. And I would just end by reflecting on one period in recent history where we saw, despite the difficulties of international relations, there were small steps towards peace, and that really occurred in the heart and the darkness of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Yes, they were aiming their weapons at each other. They were in a period where the most violent weapons in world history were aimed at each other, but they also found ways at a kind of working level to establish protocols, particularly after the Cuban Missile Crisis, to find ways to make sure that those weapons were never used. And they found ways beyond security to work together on global health. We often forget that the Soviet Union and the United States worked together to find a cure for smallpox. They worked on food security, energy security, all of this in the dark days of the Cold War. And they did it, when we look closely at these two countries, they did it because they saw that despite their differences, there was a logic of systemic risk that if they let their differences spiral out of control, they would risk things that none of their specific demands in that relationship could justify. And I think it's in that spirit that we want to look to the future and see whether, similarly, in our era, there aren't opportunities, starting with US-China, but also more directly engaging North Korea, finding ways to stabilize, pragmatic steps to make sure that despite the differences, there's at least a certain stability so that we can provide a framework for for cautious diplomacy, hoping for the best. So I'll leave it on that optimistic note. Thank you.
Thank you, John. My apologies for not having introduced the topic of this first session, which is Trump's second term, global policy and Korean Peninsula policy. In the broader context of this forum's theme, which is a new vision of coexistence peace for the world and the Korean Peninsula. Now, Hea-jeong, it's your turn. Okay. Will you come to the podium? And okay, thank you. Please to do so.
Okay, it's a great honor for me to participate in this great venue, Dae-jung Peace Conference, and to share my thought with the world-renowned scholar, Professor Ikenberry. And I would like to thank you first, the organizers, especially Dr. Haksoon, for inviting me. I didn't prepare my PPT, but I will be very brief. And my paper in English begins page 311 and brochures. So anyway, I have three general points or takeaway. Number one is Trump is a symptom rather than a cause. So Trump represents, or the Trumpism is emblematic of a American tradition of right-wing populism and deeply rooted in the pathologies of neoliberal globalization. That's my point number one. And point number two, my general observation on the nature of Trump 2.0. I think it is very similar to Professor Ikenberry's notion that Trump 2.0 is basically a revisionist power. And my point number three is what is or are the implications of Trump 2.0 on South Korea, on the relationship between Republic of Korea and the United States. Basically, business as usual. South Korea's traditional alliance with the United States first policy cannot be sustained any longer. That is my call. Okay, point number one. In September 2016, I published a commissioned paper on the rise of Trumpism, and I devised coined a trilogy of America First, White First, and Trump First. Okay, America First means it's in page 311. Okay, America First. It's a combination of economic nationalism and unilateralism directed against liberal hegemonic project. And White First is sort of a Trumpian notion of American identity. In general, United States, according to Professor Ikenberry and the liberal sort of American exceptionalist version of America is exceptional. America is not a traditional nation state defined by a shared national and historical history, something like that. America is a universal nation defined by ideals or ideologies like democracy, freedom, and so on. But Trumpian notion of America is very different from the kind of exceptionalist notion of America. It is White First. I called it White First. It is a Christian, male-based So America is like any other nation state, like a Korean nation. We have a particular history of religion, common history, Christianity, and all those things. Okay, and number three, as a political strategy, how to make a genuine America domestically and internationally, of course, in the view of Trump and MAGA right-wing populism. I only can fix the system, so I called it Trump first, okay? And then at the time, again, the time of publishing that commissioned paper entitled "What's the Matter with Trump" was September 23rd, 2016. I made some bold predictions that the race will be very close, and there is no guarantee that even if Trump loses the election, he may not recognize his defeat. And I made three particular predictions on the futures of American foreign policy in general. America's leadership in economic multilateralism is doomed. Because I found during presidential campaigns, not only Sanders and Trump, but also Hillary Clinton herself denounced the TPP, Trans-Pacific Economic Partnership. And number two, massive overseas military intervention is gone as well because of Trump's combination of economic nationalism and unilateralism. Number three, United States sort of ideological influence as a model for democracy is also doomed, okay? And what was then the implication of this kind of a rise of Trump on South Korea? I issued a warning in a Korean column in December 2016 that the so-called comprehensive strategic alliance between South Korea and United States, it consisted of three pillars: traditional military security pillar, an economic pillar grounded upon FTA with between both countries, and three sort of shared values: democracy, freedom, market economy, capitalism on a global scale. But Trump is against values, and Trump is against economic multilateralism. And for Trump, alliance is not an asset for the United States. It is a liability. Allies have been cheating, free riding, and they did not share their fair shares because of their industrial policy and all those things. So my general point at the time and still today is the rise of Trump poses an immediate and serious challenge to South Korea's alliance with the United States. And moving on to Trump 2.0, my general observation is this: during Trump 1.0, Trump administration focused on sort of taking issue with norms and practices. And in comparison, right now, Trump administration 2.0 is demolishing the very rules and institutions that had been underpinned the United States as a liberal democracy and as a liberal hegemony. So right now, United States is anything but a benevolent liberal hegemon. United States right now is an illiberal, revisionist, rogue, extractive superpower or predatory empire, breaking the international rules, destabilizing the world, and slowing down the global economy. Okay, the last point, the relationship between Trump and Korea. I think it is a coincidence. And in the 2016 and 2024 US presidential election, of course, Trump won both elections. Then the time of US2 presidential election coincided with political tumult in South Korea, organized around impeachment. At the first time, impeachment against President Park Geun-hye, and second time, impeachment against President Yoon Suk-yeol. And somehow, United States sort of gone south from beacon of democracy to the center of right-wing conspiracy theories all around the world. Somehow, even though deeply polarized, South Korea has been resilient enough to overcome self-coup d'etat by Yoon Suk-yeol. And my sense or my theory of the alliance or the comprehensive strategic alliance between two countries is grounded upon Robert Koch's idea. Robert Koch, it is not important. But anyway, material, institutional, ideational pillars of the alliance. Okay, material, it is interest and power of two countries vis-a-vis other countries, economically and militarily. Institutionally, militarily compact, combined forces, and think tank to think tank, academia. So there is a deeply embedded across the Pacific institutional network. And the third one is very important, I think. It is ideational. I think it is a combination of South Korea's rise from post-colonial divided country into advanced industrial democratic nation state. And South Korea's identity, we are part of the West. So South Koreans, we have risen these ladders of hierarchy from the bottom up to almost the G7 plus status right now by bandwagoning on the United States. And the problem is United States is not the United States that South Koreans tend to believe. So in a sense, these three pillars of ideational pillar gone, demolished by Trump 2.0, and institutional pillars as well. And the core of a strategic alliance between South Korea and the United States, there is, of course, military security realm. For South Korean perspective, the cost of maintaining alliance increases, and the benefits of alliance decreases. So the credibility of the United States provision of extended deterrence deteriorated in question. And there is another danger of entanglement because the United States demanded South Korea should allow United States sort of a strategic flexibility, not just US forces here, but some pundits and scholars argue that South Korean military forces should be deployed in a contingency around Taiwan. And if you would like to be an ally of the United States, you should do this, you should this, and you should be on our side. And Lee Jae-myung government, I think, tried to make a very difficult balance. On the one hand, this Lee Jae-myung administration is trying to sustain alliance first policy, and at the same time try to have other options, diversification and sort of a strategic autonomy as well. And the third aspect of self-reliance, internal balancing. And the problem is, in my opinion, is it possible for South Korea, especially Lee Jae-myung administration, could have these three things at the same time? And I'm very pessimistic. So in the first Lee Jae-myung-Trump summit, it is, even though the summit it has been considered a win, especially for Lee Jae-myung administration, because he somehow managed to avoid so-called Zelensky moment. But negotiation in terms of tariff has been stalled, and the issues of so-called modernization of alliance, nothing is settled. And most recently, South Korean workers in Georgia at a factory facility of Hyundai and LG was detained, handcuffed and chained. And it shows sort of a mission impossible for both countries. Of course, Trump's slogan is industrial reconstruction, renaissance, and foreign policy for the American people. And then my question is it possible United States pursue America first for its own working class, middle class? And how could that policy be compatible with South Korean economic interest? And I'm very pessimistic about it. And so my general conclusion is South Korea is at a serious crossroad. We need a new strategy, because business as usual alliance with the United States first could no longer ensure South Korean security, no longer ensure South Korean prosperity, and no longer ensure South Korea's status as sort of a good Samaritan in the global society. That's it. I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hea-jeong. Both speakers dealt with problems we experience at the global level and also at the Korean Peninsula level, Korea-US level, relations level as well. And the time is running out. I thought at the outset we had enough time, but time is limited now. But if either of you to pose a question or comment on the other speech, please. After that we'll open to the floor. So, but make comments or questions, but very briefly for the sake of time, please.
Well, I think we've got a lot in agreement in our views of the current American administration. I too, as I tried to argue, see the world breaking down, the order breaking down, precisely because the U.S. is no longer a reliable sort of capstone leader in a whole set of complex institutional relationships across what we'll call the trilateral world, U.S. Europe, U.S. East Asia, that have been in place for decades and generations. And it's like a foundation of a building breaking down. It's not just a kind of temporary cracking of this part of the building or that part of the building. It's a deeper foundational kind of breakdown. And I think, broadly speaking, even allies as close as South Korea is to the United States, and the deep the deep relationship that has been there, forged really since the Korean War and generation after generation. So too with Japan and other countries across the trilateral world. There has to be strategic debates going on in these capitals, in Tokyo, in Seoul, and elsewhere, about reducing your reliance on the United States, because I do think it's increasingly a strategic risk. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. There is a certain deep uncertainty that makes it very hard to imagine that you can plan for the long term. So I think this kind of attempt to diversify, to build regional relationships that will allow you to have other forms of security cooperation, starting with, I think, with Japan. South Korea and Japan should take advantage of that uncertainty to continue the momentum of building their own relationships. The professor mentioned power generation, more autonomy for military capacity. That would be another example of that. I also do think that another component of the South Korean strategy should be to continue to engage Washington, because there is a larger part of the American system that is also very upset by how things are going, and very much of the view that our own self-identity as a major power that has had a positive impact on the world is being undermined today. And so there are friends who want to see some kind of return to a more normal set of relationships, to reappraise alliances as more than simply we'll defend each other, but as a kind of pact, almost sacred pact that we share a fate as democracies. So those are deeper kinds of impulses that I think are still there in the United States, and I think that they will be there once this administration is gone. So I wouldn't totally write off the United States, but I do think it is inevitable that strategic decision-making in capitals, starting with Seoul, are going to have to diversify and deconcentrate the reliance on this now increasingly illiberal hegemon.
Thank you, John. And Hea-jeong, do you have any comments or questions? Please be brief.
Yeah, okay. One thing on Professor Ikenberry's comment or proposition that South Korea still need to engage Washington. I totally agree with you. And I would like to add that South Korea right now need de-risking strategy vis-a-vis United States. The de-risking is, of course, a strategic term invented by the Biden administration in their strategy against China, how to manage economic interdependence for the benefit of the United States. So South Korea need alliance policy coupled with the de-risking strategy, because right now the most immediate threat came from the United States. One example is tariff, okay? 25% and 350 billion investment, it is ridiculous, but South Korea is vulnerable to that kind of argument. And one general comment or little bit disagreement, a little bit academical one, is I don't think it is a crisis of liberal modernity. I think it is a crisis of humanity itself. Okay, not just liberal modernity. To me, it sounds too Eurocentric, 18th century and 19th century. But climate crisis and AI at the hierarchy of intelligence, human first, then chimpanzee, something like that. This hierarchy is in danger of reversal or abandoning. And this kind of a crisis cannot be contained within the Western-centered concept of liberal modernity. I think it is a crisis, human civilization. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I promised you to give, at least 15-minute Q&A session for the audience, but time is running out. So please excuse me for taking just 2 questions from the audience. And for the sake of time, please ask a question, not making statements. And anybody who want to ask questions? Oh, yeah, Professor Roh Myung-won, please.
I'll raise my question in Korean. 저는 한국외국어대학교 사학과의 노명환 명예교수입니다. 오늘 발표 말씀 잘 들었고요. 그러한 가운데서 저는 지금 현재 문제를 국제관계라고 하는 시각에서보다 이미 또 발표자 선생님들께서도 말씀을 해주셨습니다만 보다 큰 틀에서 큰 세계사적 틀에서 지금 현재의 문제를 보면서 우리가 해결의 길을 찾아가야 되지 않나 생각을 합니다. 그러니까 1648년에 이 베스팔렌 조약에서 주권 국가들로 이루어진 이 세계 시스템, 그러나 거기에서는 하드 파워, 영토, 그 다음에 이 인구, 자본 이런 것이 중요한 그러한 강대국들에 의해서 이루어지는 시스템. 이제 그 중에서 2차 세계대전 이후에 압도적으로 미국이 그러한 헤게모니를 잡아온 시스템인데, 그런데 현재는 바로 이
Professor, no, I'm sorry. I hate to intervene, but would you ask questions if you have?
예,
Yeah, please. Yeah.
제가 요 배경을 좀 말씀을 드려야 질문이 가능해서 그런데 짧게 해보겠습니다. 예, 하여간 이 디지털 시대라고 하는 데 있어서는 근본적으로 더군다나 이제 이 AI 시대에 이 변화가 와서 기존의 그러한 강대국 약소국 시스템의 그 베스트팔렌 조약이 유지되기 어려운 이제 이런 상황에서 미국의 그 어떤 트럼프의 저러한 정책은 하나의 현상이다 이렇게 볼 수 있다면, 그렇다면 이제 이 근본적으로 지금 기후 위기라든가 AI 뭐 이런 문제로 인해서 생기는 문제는 국가 간의 정책 문제가 아니라 그 사회 자체, AI로 인해서 생기는 실업의 문제라든가 기후 위기라고 하는 것은 강대국 역시도 어떻게 해볼 수 없는 이러한 중대한 문제이고, 그래서 여기에서는 약소국이었던 나라들도 이 AI 시대에서는 아주 중요한 힘을 가질 수 있고, 여기에서 세계 질서를 새롭게 가져야 되는데 바로 이 속에서 미국의 지금 대응은 트럼프 같은 현상으로 오고 있어서, 어찌 보면 트럼프는 새로운 질서를 만들기 위해서 아주 큰 기여를 하는 인물이다. 한국에서만 보더라도 저렇게 막 나가는 식으로 간다 보니까 전 국민들이 이거는 안 되겠구나 하고 느끼면서 새로운 것을 이렇게 할 수 있는 이제 새로운 길을 가야 된다. 여기는 동맹에 대한 의존을 기존처럼 해서는 안 된다는 선생님들의 말씀 여기에 포함되고 있고 그러겠는데요. 이제 이런 측면에서 저는 김대중 대통령이 이 IT 시대에 한국의 위상을 어떻게 할 거고 세계를 위한 기여를 어떻게 할 건가 이렇게 했는데, 관련해서 여기에서 그 한국의 역할, 그 다음에 이 트럼프 시대에 오히려 우리가 더 이 세계 질서를 가야 할 방향으로 가는데 바꾸는 가는 기회로 만들, 그렇게는 선생님들 두 분 선생님 어떻게 생각하시는지 그렇게 묻고 싶었습니다.
Thank you very much, Professor No. He has not asked questions, but have had a very constructive and significant comments. And only 5 minutes are left. And just one more question if you want. And I think you have all kinds of questions in your mind, but just not having time to ask and answer those questions. So let me close the Q&A session here. We are living in an era of a fear of uncertain futures, as very well expressed by both speakers. Violent populism, not only in the United States but everywhere, and even genocide and conflicts and wars around the world. And as both speakers agreed, the very foundation of liberal international order is disappearing or being destroyed by the politicians. But we don't have any leeway or any welcome for any authoritarian international order, never ever. So John in particular wanted to revive, the certain good elements of liberal international order as much as possible, because there is no other comparable alternative. And also you wanted to see South Korean government engage much more the Washington D.C. for the benefit of both countries. And Professor Hea-jeong is well known for being creative and critical of international that we are experiencing these days. And so thank you very much for both authors. As a matter of fact, I prepared 2 questions just in case, but I don't have to now. We have to close. Please give a round of a big applaud, not only to the speakers, but also to ourselves, the audience. Please.
네, 대단히 감사합니다. 이렇게 세션
And
Yes, please.
And I really thank you, the audience, and the speakers for cooperating so that we keep on time. With this, the first session of Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum 25 is formally adjourned.
Thank you very much. 네, 고맙습니다.